All right. Here we are. An odd time for a live stream, at least on this channel. But I felt like with this past Wednesday not being able to do an episode or a live stream, and next Wednesday it not looking like that, which I'll talk about in a minute. Um, I thought I'd do an impromptu live stream. So I guess the first thing is just to get a thumbs up. It looks like we've got picture and sound, and both should be clear. And I kind of felt like going into Friday, it's not a day that I normally shoot a daily drop. And I have a couple of episodes that I've just dropped about the Storm ADC from Aperture, which I just have in for a very short while. And I've been looking at the comments and reactions and stuff related to that. And I felt like it would make sense potentially for me to do a live stream. I can address these things in a regular episode, but I just kind of felt like, especially because there was a lot of chatter having to do with the Storm ADC being used as a key light, that it would be a good idea to do the live stream. So this obviously will get archived. So if you're going to check this out on the rewatch, I appreciate it. And just housekeeping wise, if you're here, you probably know about the channel, but maybe not. You might be new. This is the C47's YouTube channel, and it's primarily focused on creating content in and around video production, filmmaking, having to do with the tech and the craft of those two things. And we get into gear, we talk about the business side of things, producing, DPing, and cameras, lighting, lenses, audio. All of those things become part of what is on this channel. So, again, if you're here and if you don't mind, even if you don't want to comment or be a part of the chat, please let me know that you can see and hear me. And then I'll start to get into some stuff that I want to talk about. Partially about this fixture itself, but I also want to talk about just the the idea behind making choices when it comes to what you need when it comes to lighting for different types of projects, and what is it that might make sense for you to consider owning, and then what might make sense for you to consider renting on a project to project basis, until of course you realize, oh, I'm using that piece of kit all of the time. So if you haven't been here to the channel before, please, if you want to bring up a question or you have a comment about something that you want my attention to be on, then just put an at the C47 before you actually post that. um Brandon, what's happening? Good to have you here. And can you see and hear me? I'm assuming yes. And we're going to kind of jump into some lighting talk. Um, this is sort of to make up for the fact that we didn't have a live stream on Wednesday. And I just, now that some people are here, I just want to mention, housekeeping wise, I don't think there's going to be a live stream next Wednesday because there is an event I've been invited to for local creators by YouTube in Portland, and I don't know if it's worth going to, but I think I'm going to do that. Yeah. So there you go. What's up, DJ? You're coming to the end of your week, or maybe you've hit it already, which is great. And thank you for the confirmation, Brandon, on the picture and sound for the episode. So I don't want to just make this live stream about the Storm ADC. And I want to sort of reiterate something that I mentioned in the episode that dropped today, where I started to get into and talk about the light engine a little bit, this Blair CG light engine. I say Blair Plus, but they do a Blair dash CG. Um, what I want to reiterate is, just because there's a new light engine, just because there's more precise projected and reflected light coming out of the Storm series than some of the other lights that are on the market, we are by no means in a place right now where this is and should make you think about replacing all of your light fixtures. Okay, if you're on an original light panel, or sort of like Gen 1, Gen 2 lights, then maybe you can consider making a big upgrade. But if you're using LED light fixtures from the last 2 to 3 years that are using RGB technology, RGB ACL, things like that, that have inside of those fixtures a green magenta, shift option, um, you're in great shape. And it doesn't mean that every light from every manufacturer is going to always play perfectly with each other. But this is a big evolution. But I'm not, Aperture may disagree, but I don't think it's necessarily a revolution in lighting. We're still talking about LED chip on board based lighting solution. Yes, there's a lot of stuff inside of here from an engineering standpoint. And if you haven't seen today's episode, check it out, because I start to talk about the light engine and, the LED array and things like that. Um, there's a lot of stuff in there, but it doesn't negate what we have right now. So I'm using a Nanlite 300B2. That's burning right now at a 20% output. I have it set to, tungsten incandescent in that 3200 Kelvin range. And, just as part of this discussion, I have a color meter with me here today. I have an incident slash spot meter here with me today. I won't be using the spot meter part of it. And I have the Storm ADC. And as with any live stream on this channel, goal is education. It's a discussion. So if you have questions about not only this fixture but just lighting in general, then let's have that discussion. And again, just an at the C47 to kind of get that conversation going. So I'm going to actually take a look at some things inside of the fixture today that I haven't even covered in a video, that some things I probably haven't even looked at. I've kind of got it set up here for the live stream where there's an A and a B camera. And if I need to, I can do a 2-up on there so we can have both when we need it. That way I can kind of dig into this stuff a little bit better for you. And then hopefully you'll be able to see it pretty clearly. I might have to cheat a little bit here. You'll be looking at my bald noggin sometimes when I'm setting up, and let's say, for instance, want to show you some of the menus here because of the angle that I'm on. And that's it. So that's kind of what's going to happen. And Brandon's coming in with question number 1. So clarify something for me. Traditional or legacy RGB cob or chip on board lights would not be recommended for daylight lighting usage, especially since we have RGB WW ACL, RGB ACL available. And when you say traditional or legacy RGB cobs, do you mean just ones that are just red, green, blue? Because we did have RGBW as well. So we had red, green, blue, and then we had a white emitter, a white light emitter. Because in reality, most of the LED diodes that are out there are actually blue. And then what's sitting in front of that blue diode is something called phosphor. And based on that mixture of phosphor, it will produce a particular color temperature. So you might have something that looks more orange, and then that will produce a warmer color temperature, usually targeting in that 3200 Kelvin. You might have something that looks a little bit more, you would think blue, but more yellowish, and then that sitting in front of that blue LED. The blue LED excites that phosphor, literally. That's the way it's described, and then that will create a cooler color temperature, generally targeted at around 5600, 5500, 5600 Kelvin. And then, of course, if you had both of those whites inside of a fixture, and you combine the two of them together, then you can move between different color temperatures. The warmer one may not be targeting 3200. It may be targeting an even warmer color temperature, lower Kelvin temperature, and that might be true for the more daylight one. Daylight has a huge range, but you get the basic idea in terms of changing between those two. So I don't know if it's a recommendation of not doing that. Over time, daylight only LEDs, RGBW LEDs, they've all been okay. Ultimately, what are we really looking for when we're buying a fixture? We're looking for the most accurate white light that that fixture can produce, even if it has color capabilities, so that we can render skin tones in a natural way. And I understand that there are so many variables when it comes to this subject, including how your camera is set up. Are you using a particular picture profile, film simulation, so on and so forth? So a lot of those things factor in as well. But what we want is we want light fixtures that are producing white light that is as full spectrum and as accurate as possible in different correlated color temperatures. Um, so the newer fixtures that have come out in the last few years, RGB WW, two whites, RGB ACL, amber, cyan, lime. The mixture of these are the whole reason that we have those and these different light engines is so that we're producing a better quality of light. What's happening, Scott? Good to see you. And everybody else, Darren, sorry, Darren. And then yeah, and so Brandon, so part of the problem when RGB only lights came out, and there's still plenty of them out there, is they weren't largely designed for video and film production. And so they were designed for and started to come out as alternatives to PARs and theatrical lights that would normally be gelled, right? You would have something that would historically be a tungsten incandescent, 3200-ish Kelvin, and then you would gel those lights to produce different colors. So they started to come out with RGB based LEDs. The problem is that they didn't have white diodes in them, or at least blue diodes with a white light phosphor in them. And you would mix them together to produce white light, and that white light was definitely not full spectrum. Had lots of spikes or dips in terms of the color spectrum overall, and it was very hard to produce a good quality white light. So that's why we started to move to RGBW, RGBWW, ACL, and now we have this 5 to 7 uh, diode or color engine, which is the Blair and the Blair CG engine. Darren says, funny, I just bought a light that is directly competing with this light, the newer with two E's. I can't ever say the name of that company without saying newer with two E's. HB80C. I know totally different levels, but the in 80-watt battery is built-in 80-watt battery is insane. You should totally check it out. Oh, I will for sure. And that's nice that it has a built-in battery. Typically, Brandon would use a daylight or bicolor for key and then RGB for effects. Absolutely. That's for sure. Okay, good. Let's see what we got here. So Show G comes in with a question. Assuming you're setting the white balance, why pick 3200 versus 5600 when shooting an interview? That's actually a pretty good, I'm going to say that's a good question. Um, Part of it is personal preference, right? So part of it is that if you take a light fixture, like for instance, right now my key light and the lights in this space are burning at around 3200 Kelvin. Previous to that, not that long ago, I had most of them set and my camera set to about 5600 Kelvin. Um, I'd say that part of it's personal preference, right? But it doesn't mean that your image and the way the world is going to be captured by the camera is going to be identical if you set 56 and 3200 on your cameras, because there's inherent reflected light coming off of objects. This is, a predominantly gray background, but there will be differences, and there will be differences in terms of spectrum and other things like that. For me personally, part of it has to do with contrasts, right? So, for instance, I'm just turning this so it's a little less annoying or bothersome in frame. So, I prefer, like, I'm a big believer in then in interior light and also exterior light during sundown and at nighttime being warm. I think we associate that with something. And it's weird to me when I'm going outside at night and everything's set to daylight in terms of color temperature. Just doesn't feel right naturally because it's trying to simulate a color temperature that is coming from daylight or the sun, and that's not really natural. I'm not saying that the moon doesn't is 3200 Kelvin. I'm talking about practicals. I'm talking about artificial light, and historically, because of candlelight and because of incandescent bulbs and things like that, we associate lighting, interior lighting, and also exterior lighting um, as a warmer color temperature. So it's just part of an agreement. It's part of what we look for. And so if I'm lighting an interview and I have the choice, um, and I'm in a completely controlled environment, I'm mostly going to lean towards tungsten as a color temperature. It's warmer, it feels warmer. I think it feels more natural to talent and the space and what we're used to. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't use, and people do use daylight color temperatures all of the time inside. To me, where it makes the most sense is when you have ambient light. So this is right now a completely controlled environment, which we'll get into our conversation about whether or not you should be considering an 80 watt with a maximum 100 watt power draw unit as your main key light or as a key light for production. And I'll just cut to the chase. You can absolutely use this as a key light, but you're going to run into brick walls in the future when you're relying upon a fixture with this type of output as your main key light. So in a controlled environment, as long as your lighting modification isn't outrageous, then you can absolutely use a small light like this as a key light. That's the basic. As soon as more ambient light comes into the space, as soon as you're thinking about modifying your light in certain ways, like for instance, a book light, which is bouncing and diffusing your light, that's where you're going to start to run into some real issues when it comes to something with this amount of intensity, which is why most people who are considering buying a light for keying in a regular sort of like day in, day out job type of way are at minimum looking at 200 watt, but most people are looking in that 300 to 750 watt range. The higher the wattage, the more flexibility you have. This is a 300 B2 from Nanlite going through an almost 60-inch, 150 centimeter softbox, and it's at 20% output, like I said. So that gives me a lot of headroom, but trust me, if I'm going through a big softbox and I've got a big window behind me, that 300B2 isn't doing much at all. If I'm going to accept the fact that the entire world is going to be completely blown out, um, then that's going to be an issue. Yep. Let me just look at these questions here. So hopefully that answers that. Yep. Good. So any questions? All right, let's get into some more stuff. So what I want to do now is kind of jump into some things related to this fixture specifically and some things you should be aware of. And I'll probably do at least one, maybe two more episodes on this before it gets sent back. And then we'll kind of get into stuff. Okay. So firstly, I'm just going to reiterate some things from the last two episodes. This is an 80 watt chip on board LED light. It has a maximum power draw of 100 watts. In fact, when I'm running this off of a USB-C battery power delivery, I'm noticing that the power draw is somewhere in the 90 watt kind of range in terms of what it's pulling from there. Yeah. So let me just answer Greg's interview with windows in the background. Do you match the color temps between outside and key light? Um, Somewhat of a personal preference. You'd be inclined to match, right? Because and if you have something like a color meter, you could actually meter for what the ambient color temperature is. I do that all the time with the C800. So, for instance, we did a job not that long ago where there was a window behind talent, and we did some things to control that so it was a little bit more consistent throughout the day in terms of diffusion. But when we metered with a color meter inside, it was, it wasn't dead on at 5600 Kelvin. It might be reading cooler than that, maybe a little bit warmer than that, whatever it is. And then there's the green magenta skew. So outside of that, just pretend that this is a big window behind me. Behind that window was a field, grass, and then of course what's happening is sunlight's hitting that, it's bringing more green into the space. So it's one of the big advantages to having light fixtures where you can actually dial green magenta, because you don't want to just get perfect light in your space. You don't want to just light your talent with perfectly balanced, perfect color temperature, no green, no magenta all of the time, because then you're going to be creating a mask, or you're going to be taking part of your image and trying to correct that part, or the rest of the image and correct that part, as opposed to just making it all match. And that's one of the reasons you can use one of these, and why it's great to have a green magenta shift, right? Um, but there are times where you might want contrast. So if you can get enough contrast, you might light your talent with warmer color temperatures. Let's say 44, 4300. You might even go down to 3200 Kelvin. As soon as you do that and you have daylight behind the person, or you're using blue light, to light up a background, or cooler light, you're going to get a much bigger warm, cool contrast between foreground and background. And that might be creatively exactly what you want to do, because we are used to, especially with practicals and interior lights, seeing those lights burn at a warmer color temperature. So hopefully that answers that question. I do wish you were doing this video in the rain. I don't wish I was doing the. I know it's IP65 rated, but I live in Oregon. I got plenty of rain out there, but I totally understand what you're saying, and hence the name here, Storm. But rest assured, this was designed for the elements. Have I tested it yet? No, but if they've got that IP65 rating, that's what it's designed for. Shoji, if you were in a controlled environment and shooting an interview, what key and fill color temp you use and why? It changes. So I look, there's no the thing I want to say right now is and I will reiterate this a million times, maybe not a million, but you get the idea. Um, this is not an industry of paint by numbers. Okay, so this is an industry of uh uh, you know of learning tech, learning craft, and then saying, okay, this might be a baseline for what people do. But if nobody ever broke the rules, if nobody ever did something different, what a uncreative, unartistic world we would be living in. So the point is to understand that, if you've got lots of ambient light inside of your space and it's predominantly daylight, then the first inclination is, let's set the key light and our other light fixtures to match that as close as possible. But you may say, creatively, I really want it to feel warm on my talent and I want it to feel very cool in the background. So you may set your light fixtures and your camera's white balance to something that is a little bit different than the ambient color temperature. Um, Rules are there, or agreements are there as a baseline for getting the job done. And then as your career moves on, you start to figure out that you can change that. You can do other things. Okay, so we've got this quote unquote 80-watt fixture here. And yeah, it has a few little cool things like this new mount that they have, which is very easy to remove and put modifiers in, right? This is their, as you should, Daniel, break all the rules within reason. This is a reflector. Obviously, what this is going to do is it's going to reduce the field of, the beam angle of what's coming out of this fixture. Out of the box with this lens that is sitting on the chip on board array, with about a 60-degree, it's about 60 degrees in terms of the angle of light. And then as soon as you put this little reflector on here and you put that into place, we are now changing this over to a 35 degree. So this is a 35 degree reflector here. And you can see that it's not only going to narrow that beam, but it's also going to intensify it by nature. You see inside it's silver, and you get the basic idea. And this is a great, this is, it's like a positive locking system. So it's just like a PL mount essentially. So you put this into place. Right, you see it here. You put the modifier into place. This is a little globe diffuser, very plasticky, but it works. And then you go like this, and now that's in place. Very similar to PL mount lens. There are E mount and EF mount locking systems that have existed in the past as well. Manufacturers have seemed to fall out of favor of including those. I don't know why. I think they were great on, and they may exist on some of the higher end Sony cameras, but Canon kind of 86 that from what they were doing. So you've got that system there, and this is a always on. If you watch today's episode, I actually take this off and I show you inside. You can see the mirrors, you can see the chip on board array for the Blair Dash CG engine, right? The blue, lime, amber, indigo, which is that near ultraviolet component to this, which is helping produce a much more accurate spectrum, especially when we start to get into daylight stuff. And then red, and then the dash CG, cyan, and green, which is really the rest of the sauce to making the C part of this, right? So the X versions have Blair, and then the C versions have the dash CG in addition to that. And the whole point is to be able to produce saturated colored light. That's why you have a 7 LED, not 7 individual diodes, is more than that, but 7 LED formula in the light engine as opposed to 5 with the Blair engine. Darren says, I know it might be a weird question. Lots of people do range tests for wireless mics for app control transmission, but no one does that for lights. I wonder what the range is. That's a great question. I have no idea. I mean, Bluetooth definitely has its limitations. And I don't know the answer to that. And because I work in such small crew situations, unless I have like a little remote like this, I'm very oftentimes just going to the fixture and setting it. I do use the app sometimes, but it's just not. Linda, you're here. Not something I do all the time. All right. So I think this thing is like just under, is it just under 3 pounds? And then if you add the power supply, which is under a pound, and it's got a little nifty thing here. It's got a little V-lock over here on the side, a little safety cable, and you can just lock that in. So that lives on the side of the fixture. Actually, let me switch to the tight. Oh, come on, AF. There we go. Waking up. So you can see there's the little safety cable here that's attached to that. And then you have this little V-mount. What I've ordered, and I don't get to keep this light, but I'm going to try to incorporate it into an episode. There's that little V-mount for the power supply. What I've ordered is I've ordered a plate for this, right? So that I can attach that to this right here, this little small rig piece, which holds a power delivery battery. So what will happen is that will just be able to sit right here on the side, here. So you can see this. So that'll sit right here on the side, and then that way there can be a battery sitting with the unit. So hopefully that makes sense, but that's kind of the deal. And we're going to look at a couple of gotchas here when it comes to powering this. It's nothing outrageous, but it's just some observations that I've noticed, which could easily be addressed with a firmware update. So, in fact, you know what? For giggles right now, why don't we just go ahead and do that? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug this in. Let me just attach this for now. And I'm going to go to battery power in a minute. That's kind of part of this whole conversation. But I've got a threaded positive locking power thing here. Um, we're burning right now at 100% intensity. So let me just go in here and I'll turn this way down. We can do this in 0.1 increments. So this is at a, right now this is a 0.1, not even 1%, but it's the 0.1% in terms of intensity. And I have it set right now to 3200. There's no plus minus screen right now because of the way it's reading and all of that fun stuff. And there you have it. So that's fine. Now I'm going to go ahead and increase this. My fan right now is set to medium. You probably can't hear it because I have the Mix Pre 6.2 with noise assist right now. But right now I'm burning it at 100% here. And what I'm going to do is I am going to probably do something I shouldn't do, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm basically going to turn this off, and then I'm going to take a power delivery battery. This one will push out, this Anchor battery will push out a full 100 watts from this port. And of course, the trick is you have to have a power delivery cable that is also capable of 100 watts of power delivery to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a cable right now that is not 100 watt rated. So it will not give the fixture a full 100 watts of power. So if I plug this in right now and I'm just going to turn on this fixture, what I want to show you is I'm at 100%. Okay, let's see. Sorry about this, guys. This cable is not long enough, but can you see that? I could always go back and I might go stop down just a little. So just give me a second. I'm going to step out of frame just so that you can see this a little bit better because screens are so, there you go. Actually, I think you're okay. Just give me 1 second. I'm stepping out of frame. All right. I'm here, kids. I promise. Okay. There we go. So hopefully you can see that. I'm at 100% intensity. Here's what I'm going to do. We're going to go to the side-by-side shot here. I'm now going to take it says I'm 100% intensity. The problem is, and this is what I'm talking about when it comes to the firmware thing, it's 100% intensity based on how much power the light is getting. There are some fixtures on the market which will automatically see how much power they're getting, and they will give you a more accurate reading. They might show you a bar, like if you watch the Alien 300C video that I did on the Aperture, the Nanlite, I'm talking about Aperture, the Nanlite Alien 300C, you'll see that there is a bar, and when you aren't giving that unit full power, it still has 100 at the top, but it'll have a bar and it'll say you're only getting 40% output or 60% output. That's not what this is doing. And I can show you that right now. And you'll see this visible change because I'm going to plug the power in, which will override the battery power. Okay. And you can see that the output increases, right? It doesn't change in terms of 100% intensity right here. But what it is doing is it's giving me the full output of the fixture. So that's, to me, something that I hope we'll see as a firmware update in a future version of this light. Let me bring the intensity way down on this. Hold on. There we go. And I'd also like them to add some presets, like when you punch in, you're going 0, 25, 50, 75, so on and so forth. But I'm just going to bring that way, way down back to that point, the point 1%. Turning this off, so I'm going to strike this. Okay. And then I'm going to replace the power cable, the power delivery cable, with a cable which can actually support 100 watts. So I'm going to plug that into the unit here. These little ones are pretty cool. I've linked to them in the past. I don't know if they're the most reliable, but the name of the company is, I'm going to say Soupy. SOOPII. Soupy, I don't know. So I'm going to plug this in, and I'm going to strike this light again. There we are. We're back up. And let's go back to 100% intensity on this. Same battery, different cable. Okay. And now I'm going to take my power supply here and do the same thing. But in theory, because I have the right power delivery cable, here we go. Plugged in, unplugged, plugged in, unplugged. No difference in output. So you can absolutely get this light to give you full intensity over power delivery with a power delivery cable. The gotcha is that if you're using either a battery or a brick that doesn't give you that full 100 watts. And again, I want to reiterate, you also need to make sure that the cable itself is capable of doing that as well. And this is what I was talking about. Let me see if I can show this to you. This is what I was talking to you about regarding the power cable. It's actually telling you how many watts it's drawing. So right now it's drawing 7.5. I'll turn this all the way up to 100 at 3200 Kelvin, and it's saying it's drawing 89 watts right now. So we've got an 89 watt power draw. Just as a heads up, by the way, I've been talking about memberships on this channel, which I haven't instituted. I think this is my vision for what we're talking about for something that would be for membership. It would be more in-depth dives, Q&As related to particular subject matters having to do with production. And that would be, in my mind, you may not see it the same way, the big value added there. Why aren't we seeing a full 100 watts at 3200 Kelvin? Well, the reason that we're not seeing that is because we're not utilizing this light in all of its modes right now. Remember that this is a full color spectrum light, about 90% of Rec 2020, huge color space. And so when we start to dive into other menus and you start to tune this light for color and stuff, that's probably when you're going to see a big difference when it comes to that extra 11, watts of power. And again, go back and watch um, the Alien 300C video, and you'll see some of that happening where I'm using a big power station and I'm seeing the differences that are happening in terms of power draw, especially when you start to go into HSI, hue, saturation, intensity, and you start to mess around with that stuff. That's really where you start to, find that you're going to be drawing that extra amount from the fixture. Okay. So we've talked about powering here. And what the real intention of this particular live stream, come on, Jim, wake up, is to talk about whether or not I feel like this could be a key, right? So I've talked about already that my main key light currently in the studio is Nanlite 300B2, okay? And it's set to a warmer color temperature. Let's take a look at that. Actually, I'll fire up the C800, okay, and then we'll kind of point that. What's the color that's falling on me? I'll do a measurement here, and we're getting a, it depends. If that was a 3113, that's a 3121. Just depends, but we're getting somewhere in that 31 to 3200 Kelvin. And then we have the SSI reading set to tungsten. That's your spectral similarity index. Just got my my cliff notes over there. And that's at 84 right now, which is really, really good, right? So what that means is they realized that CRI and TLCI weren't really great, accurate measurements for modern LED fixtures because of how they projected and produce light. So they came up with this spectral similarity index as a way to read how close to a tungsten, tungsten incandescent bulb, 3200 Kelvin, or a daylight, our readings would be. Um, and not just our readings, meaning that the higher the number is, like if you're in the low 70s, mid 70s, but if you're in the, you're starting to get into those mid to high 80s, then perceivably for a human being, we're probably getting enough of that light spectrum that when we're lighting somebody, that it's going to look pretty good in terms of skin tones. Um, what's up, Ono? Yes, it is Friday, but because you're not going to NAB now because of your scheduling conflict, I decided to give you, it's not a bonus, but actually get a live stream in here. So, so those are great numbers. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze about in terms of our numbers there. The advantage I have with a larger COB light is I have a lot of headroom here because just to give you sort of a sense of where I am, if I was talking about my A camera, right now my A camera is set to 1600 ISO, right at around 3200 Kelvin. I've actually warmed it up just slightly in camera to like 33. And I'm shooting in f4. I need a little bit of depth when I'm doing things like this. And my B camera is actually stopped down probably about another stop. Okay. And I just want to make sure that I have enough. Of course, the AF is not set to where it should be. Hold on. Hold on, Mr. AF. I had to change the AF point there. But that is, I think, also at a 1600, but we're at like a 5.6. So you get the basic idea. Now, a lot of the times I'm at an 800 on A camera and an f2.8. So the math is there, right? It's a stop. If I go to 1600, I go to an f4. It's just math, which is not a subject I'm great at, but I'm pretty good at it when it comes to cameras. And maybe that's all that matters. Maybe that's all that matters. So headroom, right? We've got more flexibility with this, but what about using this as a key? Sure, we can use it as a key. Let's take a look at that concept. Right now at a 1600 and f4, I'll just take an incident meter reading with this meter here, and let's just take a look at where we are. Let me change my ISO. So that's the great thing about a meter like this. And I've already taken the reading, f4 and 4/10, right? So in theory, I should stop down that camera a little bit, but again, there's so many variables. This is why it's not paint by numbers. So I could absolutely set that to like an f 4.5. and I would be accurate per the meter, but the meter doesn't know exactly how my camera is set. What the meter is doing is, any light meter is effectively, um, it's effectively looking at this thing right here. Wow, there's a lot of, it's like a nested Russian dolls or something here. It's looking for this, right? It's metering for what it thinks would be correct exposure for 18% or middle or neutral gray 127. So that's what it's looking for, right? So when I'm taking that reading, we can be significant about it and say it's got to be exactly that. But there's so many variables in terms of the picture profile or the picture style or the film simulation, or if you're shooting log or if you're shooting, raw, which effectively is very similar to shooting in log, though you're capturing more information. But then when you come into post production, or you're monitoring, what's happening is it's taking that raw signal and it's changing it into a video signal. When it gets changed to a video signal, you kind of have to make a decision, and there's usually some sort of conversion there, right? So you might be going to a particular log, curve, gamma curve, and to a particular color space. So yeah, there you go. So I'm metering right now at about an f4 uh and 5/10, somewhere in that neighborhood, depending on where that lumisphere is. I might get slightly different readings, but you get the general idea in terms of that meter reading. And then I've already talked about the color reading, and that we're looking at close to about 3200 Kelvin. There's no real shift here in terms of green magenta. Um, I'm learning a little bit more about that delta UV value, DUV. But when you've got numbers that read 0.0003, we're in the realm here. There's nothing major happening in terms of a green magenta shift. And if I needed to on that fixture, I could change it. I could change it on this fixture as well. Um, so in a completely controlled environment, what would happen if I wanted to use this as a key? And I didn't just want it to be direct light. Well, I've got a 59-inch, 150 centimeter softbox right here. You can't see it in frame. I don't have a camera to just grab and show you. But trust me, there's a big ass softbox right here. And that's got magic cloth, so it's cutting a decent amount of the light that's coming out of the fixture itself at only 20%. And that's my key. And I've got a little kicker here that's a little, Pavo Slim that's burning at, I don't know, 5-6%, maybe 10%. That's just giving a little bit of an edge. And then there's a little bit of light at similar color temperature, just lifting that background a little. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this and I'm going to bounce it off of that modifier, that magic cloth. So it's not going to be coming through. The first thing that's going to happen is the image is going to become brighter because I'm going to basically double up. You're going to see both that, but I do have a remote here so I can turn off that key light, and then we can only look from a key source at this. So we've got this 35 degree reflector that I've now put on here, which is going to narrow that beam angle and intensify it. So it's no longer a 60 degree beam angle, it's a 35 degree beam angle. And I'm effectively going to take that and I'm going to point that up at this softbox over here, and then I'm going to strike it and bring it up to 100%. So actually, yep. So there it is, and I'm going to bring that all the way up to 100% and make sure that it's filling that whole softbox. It's got a little bit of spill, which you can feel right here because we've got a little lens flare going into B camera. But you get the basic idea. None of that light is spilling onto me per se. It might look like it is, but the reflector is right here. It's not in, it's not, it's not spilling. It's starting to spill sort of right around here, but that's not hitting me per se, right? So I'm going to now turn off the NAND light 300B2. And now what we're looking at is we're looking at bounce light off of the ADC, off of that 59-inch or 150 centimeter magic cloth. And that's it. It's just bouncing back. Okay. And if I take the incident meter and I take a reading here, everything else has stayed the same. I'm getting an f4 and 8/10. So I'm actually, with that intensified light, getting a little bit more light out of it. So let's just, figure out where I land in order to get to an f4 and 4/10. Let's see. I'm definitely seeing a change here, but I don't see what you're getting here. Let's see what's happening. Ah, I see. All right. It moves slowly here. All right, it's going down. I'm feeling like we're pretty, yeah. Okay, there we go. So that's an f4 and 4/10. We had an f4 and 5/10. Let's see. Let's just go up just a little, see where we wind up here. That's probably a little too bright. We're close. Let me see. And they go up. Let's see what happens when we're at 85% output here. That's a 6/10. Go down to 82. That's a 4/10. So somewhere in that neighborhood. That's pretty much about the same exposure. It's not going to look identical because we're bouncing as opposed to coming through. I love bounce light, by the way. And we're getting a similar light level at just over 80% output off of this fixture. Of course, I'd never have the fixture right here, and I'd probably be pushing it through a modifier. It doesn't come with a whatever this mount, mini Bowens to regular Bowens mount is, and that's part of the issue right now with the Storm ADC is not all of those modifiers exist. They're not all there. But this is basically getting me to a similar exposure. But it all falls apart when you start to bring more ambient light in there. So the answer is 100%. You can use an ADC as your key light, but it has so much to do with what else is going on in that environment. Let me turn my other key back on. I'm going to turn this off for a second. Because it's not only just natural light that is coming to the space, but oftentimes when we're lighting a space, we like to bring the ambient light level up, right? So we might take something like, a 1x1 or some fixture, point it up to the ceiling, out of frame, and then start to bring the intensity up. What that's going to do is bring the overall ambient temperature of the space up, and then it becomes a balancing game, right? Because just because you have a small fixture that can give you enough output to key somebody, unless that environment is incredibly controlled, then you're going to run into some issues, right? And then if, for instance, you take like a dome like this and you put it on here, this is frosted, so we're going to get light now, which is not necessarily always a bad thing, that's going to bounce everywhere. That might be great for certain lighting situations, but we are going to cut how much intensity is coming out of that light. The same thing when you're going through a softbox, right? So if I had this same light sitting inside of that softbox, if I could hook it up right now, which I can't, and it's really a little too big for this as well, which is also one of the things to consider is even if you have a Bowens adapter on here, this fixture isn't at 3 pounds and the way it's designed necessarily designed to have a 150 centimeter, 60-inch softbox attached to it. And would I be getting the same amount at around 100%? Probably pretty similar in terms of that. The advantage, I think, to the bounced way of using this right now is I'm much less likely to have a hotspot coming through the modifier. Um, but a lot of soft boxes have an inner baffle, which basically breaks the light and then softens it, and then it comes out the front. But that again will reduce the overall output from the fixture. One of the reasons I love Magic Cloth so much as a modifier is it because it's very forgiving and it just sort of blooms the light. It's not quite as nice as beadboard or compressed styrofoam, but it does a pretty darn good job overall of that kind of stuff. Yeah. Oh, and I guess the other thing I should do here, because I was going to give you sort of a reading, is let's go back to that 82%. Turn off this key, and you can see the difference between the 60-degree and now 35-degree in terms of that. And let's take a color reading and see where we are. And remember, this is not direct or bare bulb, right? I'm going to take a reading based on what is now my key. This is not my key. This is my source. My key is the light that's bouncing off of this 59-inch, 150-centimeter piece of Magic Cloth. So if I take a reading here, let's see where we wind up. And it will and can affect color temperature, but I'm getting at 3200 Kelvin, no green magenta shift set in here. I'm getting 3180. I'm getting an SSI of 87. So we're starting to get into the high 80s here. I've metered this at 88 at 100% output, and then that delta UV 0.0018. So virtually negligible shift overall in terms of stuff. And you know, if I took this and just for giggles here, you can kind of see my camera is not white balanced to a different color temperature, but here's 4300 Kelvin with a camera set to 3300 Kelvin. And then if I go up to, you know, 5600 Kelvin, you can see that that is starting to cool considerably. I would have to go to my camera and now set that to around 5600 Kelvin. So I'm at 56 right now, just reading wise. Let's take a reading. Boom. We're 54, 52. I've got to change my target to 5600 Kelvin and also my SSI to not read tungsten light, but to read daylight and say okay. And I'm getting a reading of 84 in terms of my SSI. Great number for daylight. Let me go change my camera. Hold on. Hopefully the AF will hold. Let's see what happens. And let's see, Kelvin. And I'll go 56 and maybe warm it up just a tiny bit to about 57. Yeah, and this should be apparent. So doing this stuff live is great. Uh, my chromatic adaptation node. Um, so you can see here, I mean, to me, it's pretty obvious that with my camera, in fact, I can A/B this because my B camera, ooh, come on. Uh, my B camera is set to basically tungsten, and my A camera is set to daylight. Now we're looking at tungsten light with a camera that is white balanced to daylight. So let me hold on. Come on, kids. All right, so we're going single source here. Okay, so this is tungsten with a camera set to daylight. But if I switch to my B camera, this is actually my B camera is still set to tungsten. So you can see color wise what's happening here, right? So there's my hand. You know, forgive me, and then go back here to A camera with tungsten lighting with the camera set to 5600 Kelvin. right? That's not what we want. So I'm going to go over and change my big key light to around 5600 Kelvin, somewhere in that neighborhood. Hold on. I'm still here, kids. I'm still here. I promise. Here we go. All right. Probably slightly overexposed, and we'll see where we sit here. About 5500 Kelvin. Uh, Definitely lower SSI readings on this. Nice SSI readings in tungsten. They go down into the 70s for this particular fixture in daylight. So just giving you guys a heads up on that. But still very usable in terms of, skin tones and things like that, and so on and so forth. And then you can see here's a tungsten white balance on a camera with daylight. You get the idea, right? All right, I'm going back to baseline here for a second. You're going to have to give me a second. Remember this if you can, because this is daylight with the camera white balance to daylight. And I think you'll feel it's a little bit different when we go to tungsten. I'm only using one source now, right? So I have no kicker, no background light. I'm single source in terms of what I'm lighting. So let me just go do this. It'll take a second, but be patient. And then I think we'll probably wrap this thing up. Hold on. I'm still here, and life is good. So we're going to go back down to getting into that realm. Coming into frame. So, and that's, that's part of what you should be thinking about here is, and this is why you need to test your equipment. Because now I'm set to essentially incandescent tungsten, right? About 3200 Kelvin. I'm white balanced to that in terms of my camera. And, you're going to see differences between daylight and tungsten in terms of how it deals with reflected light. And that's really, I think, where we're starting to head now with modern LED fixtures is the reason this Blair and the Blair-CG engine exists is because what Aperture and I think other lighting manufacturers in general are trying to do is they're trying to produce the best warm and cool uh, white light that they can. And so this is their approach to doing this and making that consistent or as consistent as possible as you're shifting through these correlated color temperatures. The bonus to the Dash CG is that you're also getting more accurate saturated projected light, which means that um, it's just going to be better overall in terms of what your cameras are capturing. DJ says, do they make those kinds of speed rings for Bowen's mount like they used to for Chimera softboxes? Well, Aperture does, because when you look at their the big sibling of this, there's a 1000C, which is the only two color versions in the Storm line right now with the Blair-CG technology. We'll see what happens in NAB. And then they have the 1200X, which is the bicolor, we'll call it, version of that. So it still has the full Blair engine. So it has those 5 colors, and those mixed together. You can actually get color out of that if you use XY coordinates, but it's not as saturated. It's not what you're getting out of the color version. But the white light that you're getting out of the color and the the 80C and the 1000C should be right on in the same ballpark as what you're getting with the 1200X. There's less space here, so that near ultraviolet component of it may not be quite as what you would get out of the 1000C and the 1200X, but in all intents purposes, the C's and the X's can be used together interchangeably, and should be fine playing well with other light fixtures overall. But that's a long way of me trying to answer your question, DJ, which is that there is the same positive locking mount on the 1000C and the 1200X. The difference is it's not this mini Bowens, it's a full-size Bowens, but it's this same PL. And it's just much faster to deploy when it comes to modifiers because, of course, just like a positive locking mount on a camera, you hold the fixture, I mean the lens or the modifier in place, right? So it's going into the fixture here. That doesn't move. The only thing that moves is this. And then you lock that into place. And then when you bring it back, you've always got to hold it because it could fall out otherwise. But that's the basic deal. Yeah. I hope that answer. I'm sort of answering your question, DJ, I think. Yeah, I think I am. I think so. All right. Now we're past an hour, and I'm ready for any additional questions. I'll go for a short while longer, but I wanted to address this because I just saw a lot of comments flying around like, yeah, I'm going to pick up 4 of these, or I'm going to use this as my key light. I want to be realistic about expectations when you're using something that is a smaller wattage unit, which you can absolutely use as a key light, but very much inside of a controlled environment. We can A/B this as well. I'm not necessarily, it's kind of hard when you see the fixture in frame, but we can we can take a look at this again, and I'll set this to 5600 Kelvin. I'm sorry, 3200 Kelvin again. And, that's how it's rendering skin tones. I'll try to do this quickly. I'll kind of like just flip one over, and here we go. But it's different. It's this direct diffusion, bounce diffusion. You're seeing this light in the frame right now. I can't say that this is a perfect A/B comparison between the two. Yeah. But I don't know about an independent mount that attaches to the stand. I mean, I think I'm sort of following you, DJ, or I might be following you. Yes, I know what you're asking. Hold on. Do I have? I don't have one here, but I think you'll get the idea. Well, you will for sure, DJ. I think everybody else will too. So similar to like when you have a collar around a big lens and you mount the lens to your plate on your tripod as opposed to the camera. The camera is like hanging off of the lens because it's the lighter component of it. The same is true for certain modifiers that we use for lighting. Right now in this space, what we're really seeing is we're seeing spotlight projector style modifiers, right? Our Licos. So those usually will get mounted to the actual light stand itself, and then the light fixture would be attached to that and would be hanging off of it like a camera with a big lens with the collar around it. So that does exist. I haven't seen anything like that related to a large modifier like a parabolic, softbox type of thing, or a large softbox. That isn't something that I've seen, at least in this Bowen space. Does it exist? It might, but I would say that I haven't seen it. I wouldn't say. I would say that I haven't seen it. Any other questions regarding this? I hope the person who's thinking about buying this is potentially their main key light is not considering that if they watch this. But it's a great light, but I just want people to be realistic about what it is. It's a light, right? And the truth is that right now we've gotten to this point where modern LEDs are pretty great. Um, this is better in terms of going from warm to cool light. You're getting even more accurate quality of light out of the Storm series, really the Blair and Blair-CG engine. But it does not in any way, shape, or form negate the quality of light overall that I'm getting out of something like this Nanlite 300B2. Are there improvements inside of this light engine and what they're doing? Absolutely. You know, Tim Kang and his team are doing amazing things in terms of getting lights to be better. And what we care about, let's not beat around the bush here, is we care about the captured image, right? So what we need to do is we need to create a quality of light. It's like we're trying to reach back in time. It's the same exact thing that happened with digital cinema cameras. We've sort of hit, I'm not going to say a peak here, but most of the camera manufacturers have now, at this point in time, 12 plus years, on from the first, well, not the first, but the gold standard RE sensor, um, have kind of caught up in that space, right? These sensors that we're getting in most cameras right now are pretty great, and they have very good dynamic range and good highlight roll off and retention and all of that good stuff. And I kind of feel like the game was always to catch up with what film was capable of, but with the added bonus of cleaner image and also more dynamic range. But dynamic range and latitude are two separate things, so that's a discussion for a different day. Um, but latitude is how much you can push or pull your image. Okay, it's not necessarily how many stops of dynamic range you have, and that's part of the magic of an RE sensor and some other sensors out on the market. Um, so Greg, yeah, I mean, I always say that if you're looking for a workhorse key light right now that's a chip on board, you should be looking for at least a bicolor unit that can go from a correlated color temperature of somewhere minimum of about, I would say 2,500 up to about 7,500. Again, minimum 6,500 Kelvin. So, 25 to or 27 to 6,500 Kelvin. And that's a true like reading of 6,500 Kelvin, because so many of the screens that we have in the world right now have a white point of D65, which is 6,500 Kelvin. And so if those are in frame or we're seeing those as part of our footage, we generally would be inclined to light with our fixtures in a controlled environment at a similar color temperature to the screens, again, so that there's an overall match in terms of color, so that there's less work in post-production. You're not doing power windows and masks and all of that stuff, which is nonsense in a small crew, fast turnaround, tight deadline situation. Um, and don't even get me started on the conversation of should you always be shooting in RAW, always be shooting in log. Um, my answer is no, but it depends on shooting situation, uh, production to post-production workflow. That's a whole other avenue and different conversation to get into. So again, just to reiterate, I think this is kind of what I'm thinking about for if there's a member kind of component to the channel. This is what I want that to be. I want to pick a topic or some area and dive into that some more and make that available. So love to hear your thoughts on that overall. Any other questions before we wrap this up? And again, housekeeping wise, it doesn't look like I'm going to be doing a live stream on Wednesday of next week because I have a YouTube event in Portland that I'm going to go to. I don't know if it's going to be a complete waste of my time or not, but I think it's worth a drive in to check out what that's all about. But yeah, but Greg, that sort of 500 to 700, and I didn't want to lose my thought there, watt range for like your core key light is going to be able to get you through almost all shooting scenarios, especially interior. When you move outside or you have large amounts of ambient light that are part of that, or you're looking outside, then that's where getting into these higher output fixtures makes a lot more sense. That's where we're reaching for, or we're doubling up on two 600s, or we wish we had a 1200. I mean, I had a situation where, because of the way we wanted to modify the light and we wanted to create a certain type of light, we wound up using two 1200s inside of a space looking outside of big windows. And that's what we needed to get to the exposure and stop that we needed. And that's the other thing, is that you're not always going to shoot everything at an f2, an f2.8, or even an f4, because the content that you're creating, maybe you have lots of depth looking out of windows outside, so things are going to fall off because of distance anyway. But what you're really concerned about is this space right here. And what you want to make sure of is, if this unit is further away from your talent, that you're still holding focus on both of those items, right? So that means that I can't always rely upon an f2.8 as my stop for what I'm doing. If it's just me talking head to camera, I can go 2.8, drop to an 800 ISO, not use a lot of light. I can play that game all day long. But once it gets down to business and I've got to show people things, and we're cutting to other cameras and we're doing that kind of stuff, you have to be able to see. You can see here, right? So there's a little, and it's also this idea of focusing from the front or the back of where you need to focus. That's another discussion. But you can see even here at like a 5.6, I can rely upon the autofocus to kick in like that. But you can see these items are pretty much right next to each other. And even at a 5.6, there's a change in the depth of field. Why is that? Well, it's because I'm on a long lens. That B camera over there, that's close to a 200 watt. 200 watt. Now I'm back to talking about lights again. A 200 millimeter focal length, right? So you can see what's happening in terms of what's in focus, what's not in focus. There's so many little considerations that you have to have when you're in production. No paint by numbers. If you try that, you're going to find out it doesn't work. Don't see any other questions coming in on the comments. So hopefully this is worthwhile. And if you're watching this on the replay, I hope that this helps you with some of the questions you might have related to making decisions having to do with different light fixtures for your production. It's not supposed to just be about this Storm ADC. It's a conversation or a discussion about lighting overall. And now I'm getting a hard time from I'm the Brown, but I posted a couple hours ago. I pushed it out to the different places, community on YouTube, and I went to LinkedIn, and I did something on Threads, and I did something on Facebook. So, yeah, there you go. I think you're gonna have to catch this one on the replay, I'm the Brown, if you just popped in just now. But I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll do some more of these in the future. And let me know. You can always send an email to contact at the c47.com, contact at the c47.com, and let me know if you'd like to see this type of thing as part of membership. Have a great weekend, everybody. It's there, or it's happened, or you've reached it in certain parts of the country and the world. And some of us have got a couple more hours left of things to do. I'm going to dig into working on an article that I have to write about lenses and fun stuff like that. So thanks again. And I hope you learned something. Take care.